Hello and good morning. I'm Reverend Muata Rasuli with the San Francisco Center for Spiritual Living, and I'm Spiritual Living, and I am your host this morning on this archival conversation about the Science of Mind archives. And I'm very excited to be doing this. It's my first one. I'm a little jittery, but we're talking about something that we all love and that we all actually live. And this thing, the Science of Mind Archives, is a record, a repository of our leader and founder and inspirer, quite frankly, Dr. Holmes. All of his works and the works of many writers are collected in the magazines and in his books. And so it's a walk through time, even that we're able to have the opportunity to like walk through this garden of knowledge, this forest of wisdom that has grown up organically, over the, I would say years, but it's new thought, ancient wisdom. So it's over the eons of time of the development of human consciousness. There's been this wisdom, there's been this thing, there's been this seed that's growing in each of us. And that seed rooted and sprouted and reached for the sun. And as it began to grow and evolve, different facets of who we are and what we are began to develop. And eventually that blossom, actually that bud called religious science, new thought, ancient wisdom, began to pollinate and spread its seed. And so we are the result of that, but our roots go deep. It's new thought, ancient wisdom, because the Bible tells us there's nothing new under the sun. And so, since we exist alongside with the sun, we consider ourselves under the sun. And so, therefore, we know nothing is new. There's really nothing original because everything is already here, which is the consciousness with which we live and breathe and have our being. And that is that God is indeed all there is. God has always been and continues to be. And as Dr. Holmes reminds us in what I believe, which we've converted several times into what we believe with various interpretations of that, is that the manifest universe is the body of God. It is a logical and necessary outcome of the infinite, the self-knowingness of God. And when you consider the fact that you yourself, your own being, your own physical body is a logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God, then you begin to realize that you are logical and necessary for the unfoldment of the universe to occur. Hmm. I can't think of anything more powerful than this. And it's not even powerful to me because powerful is filled with power, but it is power itself that is actually animating each of us, right where you are. And just as you are being animated by the power itself. And so you are not separate from it. You are not filled with it. It is intrinsic to your nature. It is native to your species. It is your habitat. It is my habitat. We cannot exist without it. It is essential. And so when we start to live and breathe and have our being from a place that says consciousness is essential and the consciousness that I have is making a difference in the life that I live, then you're setting yourself apart from the din, from the hubbub, from the horde, that cacophony of noise that tends to be the 24-hour news cycle and the oh god and awfuls and all the different social media platforms where what we do is we stream how bad things are to the point where we're convinced that it's only bad. And so the beautiful things about the philosophy is that it's a ray of hope, and a daylight filled with it. And so that's what I love about the philosophy, and that's what I'm loving about. I'm talking about this because this is my introduction to the archives. For those of you who already know, this is maybe a redundant conversation, but if there's anybody new watching, then you and I are in the same boat because this is a new experience for me. I've always just developed my own reading list, but Robert and so many other ministers in this philosophy use it. Dr. Carolyn, she's used it extensively. I've called her for enough quotes. She's like, look, join the archives, Muata. She just won't help me anymore. But she's helped me a great deal. Thank you, Dr. Carolyn, on that regard. And so I am now using it at the behest of Reverend Robert, not just for this broadcast, but I found it a rich repository of knowledge. And it reminds me of a time when I was just starting out as a minister. I don't think I'd graduated school yet. And so I was at Oakland Center, which was First Church of Religious Science at the time. And Dr. Margaret Storrs was my lead minister and mentor. And her husband, Victor Postolaki, was the minister right directly under her. And my mom, Reverend E., who went on to form East Bay with, all her accolades and success, she was the third in line. And I was like the low totem pole bottom minister, which didn't surprise me, didn't bother me. That's just where I was. And a phone call came across. And Dr. Margaret picks up the phone and she says, hello. And she listens for a few moments. And without saying a word, she hands the phone to her husband, Reverend Victor. And Victor's got a thick Russian accent. He's, hello. He listens for a moment and he gives the phone to Reverend E. She listens for a moment and she hands the phone to me. I listened for a moment and I turned to hand the phone to somebody else. And there was no one else there. I think this is when I got my stripes as a minister. On the phone was a man from Texas. He found a religious science magazine in a phone booth in the middle of nowhere. Someone had seeded the country, not someone's, because many people would take old Science of Mind magazines and leave them in barbershops and leave them in drugstores and leave them in phone booths, libraries, wherever they could. They're literally seeding the countryside with consciousness. And that seed sprouted. And this individual called California. This is back when the ministers and practitioners were listed in the back of the magazine. He was distraught. He needed to speak with someone. He didn't have anyone to speak with, and he was suicidal. So he found First Church of Religious Science in the Science of Mind magazine that was left in a phone booth that he just happened to be passing by. And he called the West Coast, he told me, because he figured it was late into the evening and someone may still be awake in California. He had just a chance. And sure enough, he called Oakland Center, First Church of Religious Science, that was at the time, and there were 4 ministers there. So he's tuning in. Consciousness is alive and attracting us and calling us unto it all of the time. And the man was an individual, he was a Vietnam vet who had been molested by a priest. And while he was in Vietnam, because, the army taught him how to kill people, he killed enough of the enemy. He considered the priest that molested him the enemy. And he determined when he got home that he was going to kill this priest. Well, he had his weapon. He had his position scouted out. He was on a hilltop overlooking the minister's, the priest's house. He's looking through a scope. He can see the priest walking around in his home. He has him in his sights. The day of retribution is at hand. He's finally going to get his revenge, and this priest is about to get his comeuppance. He's plotted this for as long as his term in Vietnam, at least. But what he didn't realize is because you were taught to kill the enemy, especially an enemy that's shooting at you, that does not make you a killer. That doesn't make you someone who can execute another human being who's unarmed and unaware of your presence. He could not shoot the priest. And then he began to lament, oh, why can't I shoot the priest? What is wrong with me that I can't even shoot this priest that everybody knows deserves to die? So then he said, well, if I can't shoot the priest, I'm going to shoot myself because I can't live with this any longer. So he was on his way to shoot himself when he comes across a dog that's been hit by a car and is barely alive. Finally, he sees something or someone that's in worse condition than he believes he is in. And he has mercy. He has compassion for the dog. And he takes the dog and he nurses the dog back to health. And he and that dog were inseparable for 2 to 3 years. They would go everywhere together. The dog that he discovered that he found that was almost dead on his way to commit suicide became his constant companion. And so he could tell the dog when to meet him at the roadside, and the dog would be there on time, and they'd go their separate ways. This is a great relationship. But one day, he told the dog to meet him at the crossroads, and he was late getting there. And when he got there, the dog wasn't there. So he figured the dog wandered off, and he went off looking for the dog. When he came back to the crossroads after not finding the dog, his dog is there. But now the dog's been hit by a truck, and he's dead. His dog is dead. And the man's distraught because he should have been there for the dog. The dog was always there for him. He wasn't where he wasn't where the assigned meeting place was. And now his companion, his constant companion for the past 2 years, is dead. And he believes it's all his fault. So he's calling someone to talk to, because remember, when he met this dog, he was on his way to commit suicide. And now that dog is dead. And he only got this information from the back of a Science of Mind magazine. This is an art story about the archives, because I believe that magazine saved at least one life that night. And these magazines are in storage, if you will. They're on display. They're able to be accessed. You can actually send a link for the archives to someone in need. You can actually download an article or a book or something that can be helpful or useful to them and send it to them in what they call it, the ebook, or and through cyberspace, internet, email. Okay, I'm telling my age here. Science of Mind Archives scienceofmindarchives.com. That's where it is. And I was on it last night. Like I said, I'm new to this. And I saw several magazines that I was interested in that all had different articles in it. And I realized I've been robbing myself and my ministry, as well as my congregation, if you will, the benefit and the beauty of the archives. And so I think I might have to just pick something from the archives once a month just to draw our attention to it, because I believe it's that valuable. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, this man is on the phone. And he's told me this story. Well, I got to tell you, I'm crying. The man's crying. I'm crying. I looked up and everybody else had left the room. I'm in there all by myself, and my dog had been hit by a car right in front of me. And so when he started talking about his dog being hit by a car, he was crying and I began to cry. And here's these two grown men on the phone crying about losing their dogs. And so he asked me the question. He says, well, what I really want to know is my dog going to heaven? Well, that was the easy one. That was a fat pitch God sent me on. That was the easy one, because there was a movie had just been out the year previously called All Dogs Go to Heaven. So when he asked me, did his dog go to heaven? I said, of course your dog went to heaven. All dogs go to heaven. Your dog is definitely in heaven. He said, well, what I really want to know is he going to look like my dog? Or is he going to look the way he looks right now, spread across the highway? And I'm like, wow. Okay. Well, that's a little bit tougher, but and now this is when Spirit began to speak through me. This is when I think I really got my wings or earned my chops as a minister, because this is when I didn't know what to say, but the truth began to spill forth from my mouth, simply because we were both locked in on the truth. And I told the man, I said, your dog is in heaven. And your dog is just fine. He looks great. He's happy. But he doesn't want to see you right now. And this talk came out of me. I said, you said that you were on your way to kill yourself when you met the dog. and that the dog had been hit by a car and was almost dead. That you nursed this dog back to health, and you were constant companions for the past 2 years. And now the dog has moved on. Remember, the dog was moving on when you met the dog, but there was a drop, there was a break in his exit because the dog stayed here long enough to teach you how to be a loving being. That's what the man told me. That's what the man told me when he when he while he was talking to me. He said that he had never loved anything in his life except that dog. And I'm like, wow, nothing? You never loved anything in your entire life? But he said the only thing he'd ever loved in his entire life was that dog. And so now I'm like, okay, well, if the only thing you ever loved is that dog, and now the dog has moved on, I'm having just a second. I can't find what you're talking. You can find it for me. The and now that dog has moved on, then the dog stayed here just long enough to help you become a loving being, to teach you to love, to teach you the depth of love. Hmm. And now that you've learned that, the dog has moved on. And the man thanked me, and we continued to have ourselves a good cry. And I believe the Science of Mind magazine, along with Presence in Oakland Center, saved that man's life. And I was glad to be a part of it. And I believe the archives can be used in this way. Okay, so my assistant today, who's not on camera, is my lovely wife, Piranjali, and she's just handed me something to read that'll be perfect for this occasion. It's called Love. I just, it's from the archives. Okay, so just one second. Is this? Oh, okay. That's today. Oh, wow. She's drawing my attention. Thank you. It's good to have somebody who can help you, man, especially when you're me. This is from September 24th, 1942. This is a gem from the archives that I hadn't meant and didn't know I was sharing, but consciousness knew. And so this is called Love, September 24th, 1942. I, I bestow the essence of love upon everything. Nothing is dead. Everything is alive. Wow. Okay, I can see why she selected this. Nothing is dead. Everything is alive. Nothing is ugly. Everything is beautiful. This love is a healing power touching everything into wholeness, healing, wholeness, healing the wounds of experience with its divine balm. Love and understanding are the greatest healing powers known to man. And then he quotes 1 John 4:18, perfect love casts out all fear. There's just these just nuggets just laying on the ground. It's like there's a gold mine of knowledge and information here. This quote is Dr. Holmes, of course, and it goes on, and I'm gonna keep reading here. To the one who suffers from a sense of inferiority and a lack of self esteem, the idea of love comes like healing medicine to the soul. In the long run, love alone can save us from ourselves, but what is it that we are afraid of? We are afraid of pain. We fear poverty, and all too many persons have an inner fear of the hurt of life, the contact with others. And there is still deeper fear abiding at the center of consciousness in the lives of too many people, the fear of death and of the hereafter. You go, Dr. Holmes. I love to hear him speak and write. Love is the self knowingness of our spiritual nature, the truth of our being. Shakespeare knew this when he said, thine to thine own self be true. Ancient Kemetic Egyptian wisdom knew this when they said on the walls and the entrance to temples and said, know thyself. Love is not only the greatest healing power, it is the revelation of truth about life, ourselves, and our place in the world. Hmm. Hmm. We have so many different things we can say about love, but this is one of the things Dr. Holmes said about it in 1942. It is life itself. Some people like to refer to it as the light. And so this thing, um, Dr. Holmes calls love the self-givingness of the spirit unto its own creation. Love is something that cannot be, it is not a noun, even though it's spoken as a noun. It is a verb because it is active. It must be reciprocal. And when I say it doesn't mean that what you love and who you love is always going to love you back. But when you open the portal of love in your heart, which is usually open. Its natural state is to be open, but we learn to shut it down because of the different experiences of life. Like this particular man who had this experience with this particular priest, he had shut down the aperture of his heart so much so that he was the Grinch. Who's what's that? His heart shrunk smaller than a pea or something like that, and so we lose sight of the truth of who we are. We don't realize the amazing, powerful, not just but power beings that we are. And so it's always a good day to get in touch with love. And so love is the essence of life. Love is how I live my existence. Love is my weapon of choice. Love is my weapon of choice because what I've realized is that, I'm in a world that does have conflict. And I'm involved in some of these conflicts. And as I was raised and as I was brought up, I had to defend myself with my hands, my feet, and whatever I could find. If I could pick up something, you defend yourself because you protect yourself at all times. But what I've learned over the years and through my study is that the most protection I can have is the requirement for no protection. And that requirement is based on the realization that I don't have anything to fear because I am one with everything from of which I'm afraid. Hmm. I can hear one of my old coaches telling me, actually, I converted this. It says, that which you fear, that which I fear is the gateway to my greatness. And so back on love, back on archives, the archives are helping us to unite the teachings of this philosophy in one centralized location. And I do see it as opportunity where you can provide, the link for gifts or go to that link yourself and download a gift for yourself or someone else. It could be a daily activity that you do just to peruse the archives and see what's there and allow spirit to lead you, guide you, and direct you into that perfect wisdom for the day. And I love to be led, guided, and directed because that means my hands off the wheel and the current of consciousness is taking me home. And there's no better blessing than that. That's the Science of Mind Archives at scienceofmindarchives.com. So you got to put in scienceofmindarchives.com and you're there. It's a blessing to you and whomever you share this gift with. And I'm grateful to be here. Let's go on to the thing that was interesting to me. And you're supposed to pick a topic for this, and I'll be better at this as I do it more often. But I went with Anatomy of a Healing Prayer because it's something I'm somewhat familiar with, even though not a great deal, but I actually have it. And so since I saw that there in the archives, I said, oh, great. Then it's something for me to reference back to. And also, of course, the quote that Tarantula just showed from me. Of course, she's busy working on the back. So I want to share something about love from this book. It's maybe one of my favorite Dr. Holmes quotes of all time. Yes, indeed. It's certainly one of my favorite passages. This is in chapter 4, and I'll just read this is I'll just read the whatever the synopsis is at the beginning of the chapter. Ernest Holmes felt at times that too much emphasis was placed by the student of healing on techniques and study, thus sacrificing the healing feeling. Ernest had a favorite expression: don't get so intellectually involved that we throw the baby out with the wash water. In December of 1958, to a group of students studying to be practitioners, he expressed this idea. And I'll just begin reading some of this. You are all through with the practitioner's course now, and I have nothing to tell you. You see, we can teach techniques for practice, but that is a very simple, but that is very simple, pardon me. But couldn't teach someone how to be a practitioner. That would be impossible. The techniques are of the intellect, and the other is of the heart, of the feeling. And I am speaking of feeling and not emotion. Not that I think there's anything wrong with emotion, but a feeling that is deeper than emotion. But a feeling that is deeper than emotion, and a feeling in which I personally think all emotions are generated and from which all emotions flow. We teach, as you know, two very simple but profound fundamental facts of existence: a divine presence and a universal law of reaction. A divine presence which is to each one of us an infinite person, and which is in each one of us what we are. This divine presence, I'm liking this right here. Did you catch what he did there? He said, we teach, as you know, two very simple but profound fundamental facts of existence: a divine presence and a universal law of reaction. A divine presence which is to each one of us an infinite person. The divine presence is to each one of us an infinite person. This is why we have a personal relationship with God. Not that God is so much personal to us and that God is actually doing things for us that God's not doing for anyone else, but that because the infinite is omnipresent, this divine presence is everywhere present. And as we relate to this divine presence, as we relate to these, I'm just going to ask you, what are you saying here? You're off camera, but you can tell me.
It's the same archives on the
1942 online.
That's the quote, and then this is the quote.
Okay.
And then it's about ultimate divine relationship.
Oh, you know where I'm at with that. Thank you very much. Starts here. Okay, let me just finish what I'm doing here. Right? Okay. I'm being led, guided, and directed through this conversation. Absolute surrender. And so we relate to the omnipresence of the divine as infinite person because we all develop this infinite personal relationship. And quite frankly, this is actually a segue to what Parantali just brought me. I may have to shift to this right now because this infinite person is the relationship we have with the divine. And he says, and which is in, okay, there's a divine presence, which is to each one of us an infinite person, and which is in each one of us what we are. I was driving home from San Diego, okay, blah, blah. He goes, is this? Okay. Mm-hmm. So part of this quote from 1942 goes on to say, the very word religion means binding the soul back to God. This is why every man in his right mind is of a necessity religious. I do not mean a necessity dogmatic about his theology. There is a mystical inner sense with which we all have. We should not be afraid of it. The Bible says that he has not left himself without a witness. This witness is some interior awareness which everyone possesses. Oh, I'm loving this. Oh my God, I'm falling in love with the archives even as I'm doing this talk. I'm loving this. I'm going to go back to the Bible says that he has not left himself without a witness. This witness is some interior awareness which everyone possesses. It may have been covered up by confusion, uncertainty, and fear, but it is always there. If anyone will take the time to believe, he will sense something solid and secure at the center of his own being. He will sense a divine relationship between himself and the universe. He will know that the divine spirit, even though of a necessity being universal, is still personal to him. A new confidence, a calm trust, an inner faith will be awakened. That's Dr. Holmes again from 1942. The ultimate relationship is the self within the inner awareness. Holmes calls it in the archives. Now, it's interesting that Dr. Holmes said something as magnificent as that so long ago. He must have known I would be thinking this in 2022. He must have realized that someone would come along with great elucidation on this subject. That would be me. Um, he's so on point here. And I just, because in truth, this omnipresence, this infinite person, means God is always our relationship with infinite person, with God. God is about relationship, and God is always about relationship, and God must be relationship because everything in the universe is in relationship with something else. There's no singularity. And once you recognize there's no singularity, therefore, then you realize, well, there can't be a singularity called God. And so, I mean, well, I guess it could be. I guess God could be a singularity that was only capable of creating relationships. But even still, that means our gateway to conscience, our gateway to the divine is through relationship. And every relationship that we have is a relationship with the divine because the divine is omnipresent in, through, and as all things, all beings, all persons, all circumstance, all memories, all reflections, and all anticipations. So we are always in a relationship with the divine wherever we find ourselves. God is all there is. It's a simple reduction. God is all there is. And everything that falls on that rock breaks because it all fades into the divine. And so, love being the self givingness of the spirit to its creation is what we are because we are of that creation. So, we are love incarnate because we are God incarnate. We are literally walking, talking, living, breathing expressions of the divine, therefore, expressions of love. And that is our destiny, that is our duty, that is our purpose, if you will. Our purpose, if you will. Piranjali asked the question, what gets in the way of that divine expression? What gets in the way of love? What can obscure, that mission, you know? And when we find out what that thing is, we start unwinding, untying, releasing that thing immediately back into the oneness, back into the love, because we want nothing. We want nothing to stand in the way. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead here on Don't Throw the Baby Out with the Bathwater. Um, okay. I'm being coached. It's okay. So before I do that, though, I will say, the things that block us are anger, fear. I mean, lack, limitation. It's actually this other rising, the idea that there can be something outside of myself, something outside of the divine, the idea that there is something that is other than divine. Because when we know that God is all there is and that I am one with God, then whatever it is that I fear is also a part of myself. And I don't have to fear myself. I know that, God's not working against himself. Master Teacher Jesus told those who asked him about, he was casting out devils in a different way than Jesus was doing it in. He said, look, the devil's not working against himself. So he can't be casting out demons. You know what I mean? And so love is not working against itself. It's not keeping you from anything. Love is giving by nature. So everything that we desire from a consciousness of love is already being given to us from a consciousness of love because that is a consciousness of wholeness. And when we understand this, we live and breathe and have our being as whole beings. There are holy individuals that because we're fully realized into the one. And so we look for those places where we're not exhibiting that and ask ourselves, how can I be more loving? What do I release, as we say in the visioning process? What do I release and what do I embrace in order to be more loving? Hmm. I hear that old song. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart, in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart. And so, love is our essential nature because love is the self givingness of God. Therefore, it's the self givingness of the universe. Therefore, it is an aspect of the divine presence with which we are in relationship as infinite person. My. That is a mouthful. Don't ask me to say it again. You have to rewind to go back, check it out in the archival conversation. Invite your friends or some popcorn. Oh boy. There is not enough ink and not enough bandwidth to describe the magnificence and the majesty of your own being. And if only you could know, if only each of us could recognize, to know again the truth of who we are, to allow the aperture of our heart to open so wide that there's nothing left, to allow the walls of persecution and terror and FU and all the different places where we felt persecuted, when we allow those things to dissolve and are open and receptive, allow that vulnerable side, that innocent side, that child nature that the master teacher spoke about when he said, a little child shall lead them. The little child that leads us is our innocence. The little child that leads us is a consciousness of wholeness. And so that is what the science of mind is about. And that's what he's talking about right here. And so it says, I was driving home from San Diego yesterday, and a thought came to me about something I think would make a very good talk, which I said, which said to me when I use that phrase, I mean, I said to myself, because there is only one self individual in each one of us, that the overdwelling presence is the indwelling person. God in you as you is you. The overdwelling, I actually didn't read this part of it before. The overdwelling presence is the indwelling person. That idea that there's an overdwelling God is existing as the indwelling presence as me. Person as me. God in you, as you, is you. There's nothing else. You can be. You didn't have anything to do with it. You did. It's not your fault, and you don't get credit for it. You didn't have anything to do with this. You didn't make it. You can't change it. You didn't do anything that was good enough to earn it, and you can't do anything bad enough to destroy it. You cannot be outside the grace of the divine. You cannot be outside the love of the divine. All you can be is the live stream of consciousness, if you will, love in action of the divine presence operating in you and through you and as you. Hmm. Back to the archives on this one. This because it gives us solace, a balm in our lives and the world. Today we experience, okay, and the world. Today we experience fear, pain, anger, and hatred and resentment. Where do we turn? To our centers and spiritual communities. Yes, we can also turn to wisdom shared before, captured in the archives. So, yes, you can call a practitioner. Yes, you can go to the center. Yes, you can call your minister. Yes, you can call friends. And yes, you can use this resource, this vital, rich resource to enrich you and to replenish you. And that's what we recommend. Because as Dr. Holmes tells us, we use the truth wherever we find it, and it is definitely found in the archives. And there's nothing else you can be. You didn't have anything to do with it. You didn't make it. You can't change it. You didn't do anything that was good enough to earn it. And you can't do anything bad enough to destroy it. We're talking about love here. We're talking about the overdwelling presence and the indwelling um, person. Okay, that's just the way it is. That is the relationship. That is the way we show up. There's nothing we can do about it. It's important that we get this. I always say that at every funeral, I always say that at every funeral because it is true. Life is existed. Nothing made God. The fundamental premise of our whole philosophy is that where did I go? Of our whole philosophy that we live in a self-existent universe, self-sustaining, self-energizing, self-perpetuating, self-knowing, self-acting, and that the entire manifestation of life exists for the delight of its creator. Did you know that you exist for the delight of the creator? That God is delighted by you. This information is available not just in the Anatomy of a Healing Prayer, which you can order online from the archives. You can buy your books there. I'm loving this. I'm really loving this. The entire manifestation of life exists for the delight of its creator. We are not here to get saved. We are not lost. We are not here to glorify God. He isn't that much out of material. We are here to express that which is, and that is what accounts for all of those inward feelings that everyone has, nebulous, incoherent at times, sometimes nearer the surface than others, but a steady persistency back of all things, an urge to live, to sing, to dance, to express life, to create. That is why it is known that life doesn't create. That is why it is known that the life that doesn't create physically dies and mentally dies in order that it may get a new deal again because of the congestion of the uncreated life which came with us. And we didn't do anything with it. Now, whether there's a child making mud pies or a new pope choosing his new cardinals, one is not more important than the other in the sight of the eternal. This is so important to get, this. I have difficulty. I had to learn there's a difference between a hierarchy and structure. I have difficulty with hierarchies, but I've learned that structure is necessary. We are so accustomed to big and little, good and bad, up and down, over and across, right and wrong, sin and salvation, that it is difficult for us to believe this. You and I believe there is nothing but God, that there isn't anything else. This is where it gets really good to me, people. This is the part I always quote, but I wanted to give you the lead into it. But I love this. It's like I feel like I'm having church right now just reading this. He says, "You and I believe there is nothing but God, that there isn't anything else. God is the snail out here. This does not in any way lessen God. It does glorify the snail. We are each that incarnation of a divinity, and against each presses the insistent urge that will not let anyone alone because it is their life and more life. Life will not leave you alone. Get over that one. And then he goes on to really talk smack. He says, second paragraph on page 62 of Anatomy of Healing Prayer. Now, very few people understand the meaning of a spiritual universe because they think mistakenly that the spiritual universe is philosophically and religiously a theory. They do not know that the universe we are looking at now is that universe, the universe we are in now. They are looking for an eternity when things will be all right. Hmm. They do not know that they are in that eternity now. They are looking for a salvation which they already have, even though they are not using it with freedom and enjoy. And then he goes back to what we believe. We believe to be, we happen to believe in a spiritual universe. Jesus said, "Behold, the kingdom of God is at hand." Probably most of them, speaking of his disciples, probably most of them looked around and said, "We don't see anything." But he saw something and heard something and felt something that every practitioner in our field must see. Now, this includes licensed practitioners and unlicensed ones, because if you practice the philosophy, you are a practitioner. But you may have to go get a license if you want to be called a licensed practitioner. But he says this is something that every practitioner in our field must see. That means everyone who practices. And then he quotes the Beatitudes. He says, "The pure in heart shall see God." And he doubles down. He says, "Now, this should be interpreted literally. This is not a figure of speech when he says, the pure in heart shall see God. Because where there is no longer any adulteration of spirit and not spirit, of God and not God, of being and not being, there will be nothing left but what is, which is being." And he goes on to say that, and we believe in this being. And when he says being, he's using the capital B, which means he's talking about the universal being. And what he's saying is, the pure in heart shall see God. Now, this should be interpreted literally, because where there is no longer any adulteration of spirit and not spirit, of God and not God, of being and not being, again with the capital B, there will be nothing left but what is, which is being. And we believe in this being. That's on page 62. On 63, he goes on before. There is a divine pattern of every cosmic manifestation and an individual pattern of our own, which I believe is the result of the sum total of the whole belief of the human race, our directly inherited tendencies, and what we have contributed to it, rightly or wrongly, wisely or unwisely. He's talking about that divine presence, that our relationship with the, what do you call it, the over presence and the inner presence. There's a divine pattern of every cosmic manifestation and an individual pattern of our own. So in the macrocosm, there's a pattern that is mirrored in the microcosm. As above, so below. It's the law of correspondence, which, quite frankly, um, well, we might get to that later. Okay. But it is necessary that we realize that we are living in a spiritual universe now. People, if you get nothing else from the talk today, get that the archives are available for your enjoyment and your assistance, and the uplifting of your consciousness. And perhaps even more is that this is a spiritual universe in which you are living and breathing and having your being, and that the being that you're having is one with the divine being. We believe in this being means we believe in God, the beingness. not the personality so much as the beingness, the infinite presence, and how we individuate the personality. But it is necessary that, okay, right, that we realize that we are living in a spiritual universe now, a universe which is perfect God, a universe which is a perfect God, that there is a perfect God, perfect man, and perfect being right now. I learned to say this growing up in my science mind classes. They just taught us by rote: perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. Perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. It actually serves as a mantra as well as an affirmation: perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. Perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. Perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. Brings us back to center. God is perfect. Humanity, spiritually perfect. Yes. And, well, there's only one perfection. God is perfect. We are perfect. There's a perfect relationship. Perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. The beingness of the divine is perfect. Right where you are is perfect. It's difficult to say that when your circumstances seem dire and bleak, but with a consciousness of wholeness, you'll find you're in the perfect spot to get beyond that spot, because now you have the awareness to rise above it. And that's what it takes to rise above it. Consciousness is cause. Consciousness is cause. And so that there is a perfect God, perfect man, and perfect being right now, and that we are experiencing it right now, and that everything that contradicts it itself is to be contradicted, not necessarily vehemently, violently, or by resistance, but it is to be contradicted because it is not true. You see, if there was such a thing as a science of mind, there is a technique, a mental technique applied to the recognition of something that exists before we recognize it, or there would be no principle to demonstrate. He's saying this doesn't have anything to do with you. Principle just simply is. And if it wasn't there, we couldn't use it the way we're using it. So the fact that we're using it the way we're using it means it must be there. And if it's there for you. The entire universe is here to serve you, because the entire universe, Dr. Holmes tells us, is the manifest body of God, the logical and most necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. And so that logical necessary outcome, that body of God consciousness, is the essence of who and what we are. And when we know this, we don't have any enemies. We don't have anything to fear because we're not separate from anything. We just work on demonstrating the principle. And when I simply say demonstrating the principle, what I mean is we work on that realization of wholeness we have within ourselves, so that whenever we find ourselves in conflict anywhere with anyone at any time over any issue, over any subject, we surrender the principle. In the 12-step program, they have a principle before personality, I believe they say. And I found both of those two programs about the same time. And I realized in my science of mind training, in my foundational class, that principle was smarter than me. And you need to know how big a revelation this was, because I always thought I was hecka smart. And but I bowed to the wisdom of the philosophy in the textbook, and I bowed to the philosophy of oneness. And I bowed to it because I realize it resolves every conflict I have and have ever had. Because once I go to oneness about any subject or any circumstance, I cannot defend my argument against it. I cannot defend my argument for it. I'm in oneness. I'm with harmony with it now. And I realize it's all part of the divine plan, even as I'm a part of the divine plan. And Reverend Muata is just amount of much of the is no more the divine plan than lunatic Muata was back in the 80s and the 70s, when I had really just hadn't found my way yet. And so I'm saying this because many of us may not be feeling all that holy and all that divine and all that whole, perfect, and complete right now. But I can tell you for a fact that I was snatched from the scrap heap. We need power right now. I was snatched from the scrap heap uh, of consciousness and given another chance with this philosophy. It saved my life. This is not a figure of speech. It literally saved my life. And I believe it has something for everyone. And I believe it has something for you. And I believe that you, right where you are and just as you are a manifestation of the divine. And so therefore you are an aspect of that. What he says, the manifest universe is the body of God. animated principle in the body as a body of God. So this has been a delightful conversation about the archives and about consciousness and about love and about life. But more importantly, it's a conversation about who you are and who we all are, and the realization of wholeness that comes along with that idea. And so please know that you are blessed and that right where you are. Oh, yes. And special gratitude and recognition today to Piranjali Plaza of my life, who came to assist me and came up timely as she always does. It's just such a delight to be able to be one. Almost lost our production there. It's such a delight to be one with consciousness, one with God, and in the way we show up in the world. And it's just such a delight to be on these conversations in the morning and to know that I'm making a difference. And because I know all consciousness and all conversations are making a difference. And so the realization of wholeness that I get when I'm having these conversations, to know that someone is out there who's listening, who may be able to contribute, who this knowledge to someone else, like the Science of Mind magazine did in that phone booth that day, and it saved a man's life and perhaps a priest's life too. And it taught me that I could listen and Spirit would speak through me, which was probably the very beginning of my official ministry. And so I'm grateful for that experience as well. I'm grateful to this um, new thought. What is the Robert call this? Um, Media Network. I'm excited about this opportunity that this platform has to disseminate this information around the world, and everyone listening right now, whether you're listening to it live, listening to it on tape, you releasing this film, you sending this or providing a link to this, is you are literally disseminating consciousness around the planet. When you do that, everywhere you send it, you literally are like Johnny Appleseed, where he was, tra la 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 la, travailing across the United States planting apples. I understand he planted those apples because he wanted to make them into wine. But, that he gets the credit for the great apple orchards that we have in the United States. I'm not sure if the story is true, but I do know this, that you are seeding consciousness right now. Even as a farmer seeds a cloud for rain, you are seeding your consciousness for blessings. With every breath and every heartbeat, right where you are, and just as you are the blessing itself. And when you recognize yourself as a blessing, then you don't have to worry about who's getting what and who's owed what and who's due what, because you know that you have been blessed so much in your life that you yourself are literally a blessing, a walking, talking, living, breathing blessing. And that wherever you show up, the divine presence is, and the blessing is also. And so you begin to view your presence and your relationship with life and the divine as one of making a contribution of consciousness, because that is what we are always doing 24/7, 365. It is always about a contribution of wholeness. So I'm blessing and being grateful right now for this opportunity that I've been given here at New Thought Media Network. Blessing Tracy Brown, who, man, Tracy's such a beautiful, special individual who just gives so much of herself from such a very, very deep place. It's apparent clearly that she's done her work and continue to excavate deeper and deeper um, civilizations of consciousness that have been buried under the muck and mire of everyday life. She's doing the work, people. She's getting it done. She's a way shower for us, and I'm very, very grateful to her and Reverend Robert, who I've met, of course. And so this has just been a great and fun Saturday. And so I haven't noticed any comments or questions that have come across. And so I'm assuming that there is none. And that's unfortunate, because I always like to answer questions live, because they cause me to go deeper in the moment and and inquire about something that I hadn't thought of before. And so it's another part of myself is calling out the rest of myself to resolve a conflict that part of itself is having. And so that is not happening this morning. And so we'll go back to our reading as we still have a little bit of time. He says, we have a principle to demonstrate. We know how to treat technically and in techniques. And now each one of you will have to learn from your own experience that which no one can teach you but yourself. The Gita says the self must raise the self by the self. And from Shakespeare to thine own self be true, it must follow as a night and day that thou canst not then be false to any person. Every practitioner in our field has a secret with God, and that is his realization of the divine presence to him, in him, through him, as him. Because you and I will never awaken a corresponding realization in someone else beyond the level of that recognition, realization, and embodiment of the same thing. Wow, this is so powerful. I had a member come into the center one time, and she was a business owner and she needed a payroll. This is such a good quote, what he says, right? You cannot demonstrate beyond that level of, how do you say that? Even though that's kind of exactly what happened. He says, you can't be right, because you will never awaken a corresponding realization in someone else beyond the level of that recognition, an embodiment of the same thing. She needed $10,000 by the end of the day, and I knew in a moment she said that I did not have $10,000. And so I felt intimidated by her desire to have me pray for her to get this $10,000. And I really would say, I start thinking about all the practitioners I know are good for praying for money. You should call Dr. Margaret, or you should call Reverend E. I'm thinking about all these other people who are wiser and more stronger and more powerful than I am. Go to the bank, get a loan officer. You need to find somebody besides poor little black Muata. Okay, I don't have it. I went to my victim conscious. I went to I don't have it consciousness. But she kept looking in the eye saying, Reverend Muata, I need $10,000 by the end of the day. I realized I did not have what Dr. Holmes called a corresponding, let me try to get this right here. I did not have a corresponding realization, an embodiment of that same thing, but I realized that she had it. And so she knew with such ferocity and tenacity that she was getting this money by the end of the day. She looked at me with such certainty that I was a aspect, a lynch of that happening, that I began to lose my own faith. And when I say lose my faith, I didn't lose faith. I lost the faith of limitation and lack and fear that I had with that request. And I prayed from her faith. I said, let me pray from her confidence. Let me pray from her faith. She has the corresponding idea. She has the mental equivalent. She's aware of everything that goes along with it. And so I prayed in all earnest from the place of consciousness that walked in the room knowing $10,000 was in there. And you know what? She got the money. Because where there's no adulteration of spirit and not spirit, of God and not God, and being and not being, there's nothing left but being. And as Dr. Holmes says, we believe in the being. And I had to get outside of Muata and get inside and allow the being to be. And just allow the beingness to happen. And I grew and she was able to make payroll and everything was better. And so I'm sure we are now at the top of the hour. And I'm just known to continue the conversation because I love doing this. And so, good morning and happy Saturday to you. I'm actually attending a wedding later on today. And so, there are other things for me to do as well. But you know what? There is nothing I enjoy more than what I'm doing right now. It could be said it's the one thing that really gives me joy outside, of course, my lovely wife and my grandchildren. And I'll throw my children in there too, because, they're pretty cool. And so I love my center and I love my life and I love each and every one of you. And God bless the New Thought Media Network. God bless Reverend Robert and the work that he's doing here. I think it's critical. I think it's essential. And I could say it's necessary, but then that's even more redundant. And so I thank you for being present here today. And I am waiting for someone to tell me that the show is over. But if the show is not over, then I'll just keep talking because we can always do a spiritual mind treatment. If there's any questions about what's going on today, about the conversation we had today, or about the archives themselves, I'll be willing to answer them to the best of my ability. And okay, so let's just go into prayer. It'd be nice if we had some but I don't see. Oh, and okay, and I got a note she just ended. So thank you for joining. God bless you, each and every one. This is Reverend Muata with the San Francisco Center for Spiritual Living, signing off from this archival conversation about this conversation about archives and your access to them and their availability to you. So God bless you, and I'm signing off now. Peace.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.